All right, so let's get underway. What's going on in this dungeon? What are the key levels and the affixes for this one?
So key level is +20, and the affixes are Tyrannical, Raging, Volcanic, and Tormented. We decided to do a pretty big pull to start out. We did about roughly 30% trash with the boss, but really there were only a few dangerous things in this first pull. The only mobs that do very dangerous casts that you need to look out for are the Corpse Harvesters and the Stitched Vanguards. So you see we have one right here and one right here. Otherwise, we're pulling a bunch of Blight Bags, Soldiers, and then we're also going to pull this middle pack up here, which the Talking Head is blocking. So in this pull, you'll see we have 2 Stitched Vanguards and then 2 Corpse Harvesters. The Corpse Harvesters are just going to sit there and throw flesh. And outside of that, they're going to cast a very dangerous AoE that you need to interrupt. So we had 2 people assigned to interrupting these Corpse Harvesters. The Stitch Vanguards don't really do anything except for tank mechanics, and then Meat Shield. The Meat Shield gives them a massive shield, so those also need to be disrupted. So we had 2 people assigned to interrupting Corpse Harvesters and 2 people assigned to Stitch Vanguard Meat Shields. Outside of that, it was basically just blast AoE and use weapons to kill the pack. So at this,
we
go ahead.
saw JPC run off to the right-hand side to grab the javelin. What is the general rule for grabbing that spear? Like, when are you going to be using it? Because you said there's a lot of bags and soldiers in this pack. So is it after all of those die?
No, so you use it on pull, and the main reason that I grab the spear actually is just like because of opportunity cost, because Rogue does the least amount of damage here. So it just makes the most sense for the person that does the least amount of damage to be throwing the spear. And the main benefit of the spear, like, of course it does a bunch of damage, but the 20% damage increase taken, like when that gets split between all the mobs, that's really what makes the pack melt. So the rogue, like, you have to AM in order for the rogue to get there and then get back to throw the spear in time for the chain sigil. But it's also helpful that the rogue has tricks and stuff so that he can drop the threat of the spear and vanish as well.
And like Aura Mastery Crusader Aura. So
yeah, exactly. Aura Mastery Crusader Aura.
Oh my goodness.
Like the mount speed, yeah, it actually makes a difference. And also, that you have to kind of do like a little hesitation sort of, because if you face pull the mobs, then you just die. So I basically run through the mobs immediately after Nerf either body aggro's them or puts a spell on them. So you kind of have to watch out for that a little bit too.
Yeah, so you'll see.
You ever found these mobs as well to be like particularly weird with initial aggro, or is that just something that I've seen happen to? Because I've seen happen to other people where like they still hit somebody else after like 2 seconds into the pull.
Yeah, you'll see that happen to me.
Yeah, on the right side, the blight bags, they don't do that much damage, so it only really ever happened to me with those. And if those did get on me, I just tanked them because they didn't do that much damage. But the soldiers, it was important that I didn't aggro them.
You'll actually see that aggro problem happen to me, and it's part of the reason that I started bopping myself on this first pull while gathering. The hardest part of this pull is definitely just gathering all the mobs and grouping them into one exact spot so that the spear hits everything. That was definitely the biggest hurdle. You'll see here at the start, Onesie is gonna Mind Soothe the Harvester and grab the hammer, and then, like JPC said, you can see him right here. We kind of walk right here, or he's standing right there. You see right there, Nerf purges that blight bag and pulls them. So at that point, I Aura Mastery, and then JPC is going to run over, grab the spear, and head back. All this time, we're going to place a Ring of Frost right around here so that all the mobs that are running in get funneled into one exact spot and can get sigiled straight into the middle. At that same time, you're going to see me horse and bop myself. The reason I started bopping myself was because of what you were talking about. These soldiers and blight bags have kind of a weird aggro table initially, and they would just start meleeing me. So I decided I was just going to bop myself, and I go and I pull the boss. So you're going to see me run past all these mobs, pull the boss, and while right here we set up the Ring of Frost, which gathers up all of these mobs, and then they all get gripped in there instantly, and then JPC throws. And at this point, we're just doing as much AoE damage as we possibly can while interrupting meat shields and not letting the Corpse Harvesters get their cast off.
How many times would you say you've done this pull in practice before you got it to work this big?
We actually got it to work like the first time, but then we started struggling. Well, like the first time, it was kind of luck because we managed to just hit the grip sigil perfectly. But then later on, as we kept doing it, it was harder to do it consistently until we found like exact spots to place the Ring of Frost and the grip sigil in order to hit every mob. So consistency was a bit of an issue until we really nailed down those exact sections.
Also, correct me if I'm wrong, Ellie, but I'm pretty sure when we first started this pool, we were originally bringing in the fire guy, and we were doing a lot of pulls with the fire guy at the very start, and we noticed it was just a little too sloppy for what we were comfortable with, so we ended up just moving him later into the fight with the Goliath orbs, and it ended up working a lot cleaner that way.
Yeah, and we really didn't lose any time by pulling him in after that pull because we would go collect the Goliath orbs and they would just passively kill him while we continued focusing the boss.
Yeah, we basically never touched him. It was just the Goliath orbs just taking him out for us, so we ended up not losing much time just because of that little swap and made it a lot more safe overall.
There was actually a really interesting problem I encountered as a mage where we got this pull down so fast that if I mirror's image on pull and we killed the casino mirror's image is like a threat drop and a DR. We kill the pack so fast and we head over to the Anima Goliath to get our orbs, and my mirror's image would still be up, and they would pull through the Gateskeeper and pretty much ruin the entire pull. So pretty much our solution was to just not press mirror's image, but that was a very funny problem we encountered because obviously as a mage, it's like muscle memory to press mirror's image all the time. So like that, like the solution was just to not press that pull because the pull would go so fast that my mirror's image would just walk right through the Gateskeepers. It was funny.
And would you ever pull a gatekeeper, or is that just like
No,
obviously that's strictly off limits for
no. If we pull a gatekeeper, it's like we are like, oh no, this is not good.
Gatekeeper is the worst thing you can pull in this dungeon.
One of the things we also had problems was baiting the very first frontal when like everything is going down. Sometimes we would have an unlucky bait towards like where like the Blightborn is right now, like directly behind it. There's that gatekeeper. Sometimes that would actually pull with the flesh or the belch thing, whatever he does.
But when it spawns those little worms, if they spawn too close to
sometimes we
the heavy
over there, and that would pull the gatekeeper. So those are some problems we had too. But we faced the first one towards where the boss comes from, so that helped a lot.
Yeah, in these massive pulls, you'll notice that like the most important thing is just not pulling too many dangerous mobs. So you have to have enough stops and have assignments for each dangerous mob in the pack. So you can do a huge pull like this where we did 30% trash, but mostly because 90% of the mobs were not dangerous mobs. They didn't do anything that we cared about. And there were only 4 actual dangerous mobs that we had to have assigned. And luckily we have 5 people, so we were able to cover them. I mean, that's kind of the key thing when trying to determine what type of big pull you're going to do. You just need it's not a question of how many mobs, it's a question of which mobs and how many of the dangerous mobs are there. So you see, basically after this, we drag the boss over and then we just go collect our Goliath orb. It's pretty straightforward at this point. We're just doing the boss and the incinerator. We never touch the incinerator simply because the Goliath orbs just do so much AoE that it will just passively die. This heaving wretch actually causes some issues here because when these orbs would spawn, there would be a silence pool. We would sometimes face that towards the gatekeeper, which is right here, which is definitely something that caused us a couple wipes. But then right after that, he also drops a silence pool. And when he drops that silence pool from those ads dying, sometimes they would drop right on the Goliath orbs, and it would silence people while they were picking up their Goliath orb while the incinerator was casting, and we would miss our interrupt. So we started making sure that we collected our orbs at a better time and didn't just like YOLO into the silence pools during an incinerator cast. So at this point, we just dragged the boss over onto this 5-pack, and again, we have Goliath orbs, so we pretty much just continue to single target Blightbone and ignore everything. The only thing dangerous in this pack is the 2 corpse harvesters, which need to be kicked. Their drain fluids needs to be kicked, or we actually wiped that a couple times, so those needed to be assigned. And the other thing we sometimes wiped too was as soon as they hit that 30% threshold, because it is raging, the throw fleshes would start to hit really, really, really hard. So you'll see I actually throw out a Hodge on one of these at 30%, and we try to get a stop on the other one. It doesn't always happen. But the biggest thing is just making sure that 2 of them don't go off on the same person at once, because that would one-shot someone. So as long as I was able to Hodge one of them, generally they kind of just took care of themselves with the Goliath orb.
This is such a silly pull that Nerf is able to keep his cheat death and then just pulls that pack with Incinerator plus the boss only with Feldev up. Like that is all he ended up needing to use there.
But we have the orbs, so the orbs is continuously healing him as well.
Yeah, the orbs from us heal Nerf for a ton. So I actually don't even like heal Nerf whatsoever, because basically the orbs are just doing all the work for me.
Well, isn't that normal?
Yeah, true. That's true.
Very true.
Real information.
What did you have to do on this pull to survive, Nerf?
Press Feldev.
That's it? All right, yeah.
The orbs are insane.
You just press Feldev and then just keep spamming Spirit Bomb.
Yeah, I think the funniest thing to me about this pull is it looks to the spectator like it's extremely impressive, and it's like this crazy pull when you do so much trash, you kill the boss. But this is actually like, for the player's perspective, it's probably one of the easier pulls of the hard pulls, like in the various other dungeons, which is kind of surprising.
But I think this is one of the easier ones compared to like what we had in Sangun.
Yeah, or Playful and stuff like that.
Yeah.
A lot of Necrotic Wake feels easy simply because the weapons just put in all the work for you. Like,
yeah, I guess as soon as you get the orbs in the pack, it feels very easy. Just because it heals so much, right?
Yeah.
If you stack it, it's like everyone's healing each other.
So we opted to just skip all of this. We go and pick up the orb, and we just skip right by all this trash. We don't even get that Goliath orb, because we kind of felt like it was a waste of time to just sit there, considering this pack dies in like 15 seconds or something, because all it is just the 2 shields and then the Necromancer. So we always shackle this Brittlebone Mage, because that mage causes a lot of AoE damage on higher keys. On this key level, it's not quite as dangerous, but it's still just a good habit to always CC this mage.
In every key level, right? Like the mage just always stop that thing from getting involved in the pull.
Yeah, it's just too much free damage.
And
yeah.
So where's JPC right now? Because you can see him like on the minimap. He's like far away.
He's grabbing the spear and hammer back there. And so because he's not there, the kicks on the Marauders are me and Nerf, because JPC's not there to kick. So me and Nerf are assigned to kick the fears in this pack.
Yeah, so right here, there's a spear and a hammer, and James stays here and collects those while we continue on.
And then in this pull, you mentioned that it's just the 2 shields and the Necromancer. Again, this is something for live servers too, right? It's like, just don't put too much damage into those Marauders until they put their shields, and then nuke them, right? And you can just kill them entirely that way.
Yeah, I got to put my Marauder on focus, and I just target the Necromancer, I see the shield, and I target my focus, hit the shield.
Ellesmere even doing ethical shield damage there as well.
Yeah, always. All that matters is that you kill those shields in time. As long as they die,
dies, yeah.
There's one thing to notice is on this next pull, I kick the very first cast, and sometimes depending on the spell queuing of the Marauders, they'll like cast very late, and my kick won't be up. Like you see my kick right now, right? Like pause, really. Like my kick is coming up right now, but there's some times where my kick was not up because of the spell queuing, or we kill it too fast, one of the two. So it'd be like we'd start this pull with like a 6-second cooldown on my kick, where I'm supposed to kick this very first sorcerer up here. So that was something we had to like play around a bit. Like usually to get that far sorcerer into the pull that we're about to do, we mage kick into DH silence. But if my kick wasn't up, we would swap it, so we'd silence into my kick. But my kick is up here, so that was just some random.
And are you like calling that out as the pull is starting? You're saying, like,
I'm like, my kick
kick
will be up. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, cool.
So I get my kick there, and I grab the hammer that the sorcerer was on, and then immediately I blink soul shape to the spear, and then we start the pull.
So
Why do we have the shield? What did we pick that up for? Because nobody ever picks that up on live.
I just grabbed it. I actually always pick up the shield, because basically the shield is a 50% DR for your entire group. And in a catastrophe, that shield is incredibly valuable, whether or not it's for a tank DR. Like imagine just having an on-command 50% DR for your tank for 8 seconds. Like it's really, 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 really strong. Obviously, 90% of the time, I will not be using it because... Like, there's just rarely a situation, especially in a coordinated environment like this, where that amount of unpredictable damage would be going out, where I would need to stop everything and just, like, throw up that DR. When Prideful existed in Season 1, I would always pick up the shields, and I would always use them on the Pridefuls, because it was super valuable there. But with Prideful gone, it's not quite as important as it used to be. That being said, I still always make a habit of picking it up just in case of an emergency. Like let's say on last boss, you for some reason like things get messed up and there's like a 6 stack of the shield and your DPS, 2 of your DPS are down and you have to live through it. then you can provide your whole group a 50% DR while finishing off that shield, and it can save the key. Now, that rarely happens, but it's just a good habit to pick it up just in case.
I think DPS players picking it up on bursting week is really valuable. You can just fire it off on like a 8 stack of bursting if you ever get one.
Yeah, for sure. So this big pack looks really dangerous, and there are a lot of really dangerous mobs in here, but we use the tank orb, the one that Nerf picked up during the Shroud. We use that orb to basically just obliterate this pack along with the Goliath orb. The most dangerous part of this pull that we encountered were the Bone Carvers. They put a really nasty debuff on your tank that reduces their maximum health, and it stacks up, and there were a lot of Bone Carvers in here. So originally I was running Repentance in order to CC mages and stuff like that, but I actually switched to Blinding Light specifically for this pull so that I could interrupt as many Bone Carvers as possible, because if you disrupt their cast of, I forget what it's called, but if you disrupt it, it's like Bone Flay or something, then they don't recast. So all you have to do is disrupt it once, and then he won't get 5 debuffs and have his max health reduced by 50%. The other dangerous thing in this pull is, or thing that we had to adapt from the Skeletal Monstrosity, was he does this big AoE. And the thing about the Goliath orbs is that you have to be in melee on top of the mobs in order to be getting value out of it, since it's a pulse around you. So when we would all run out, we would just lose a ton of value on our Goliath orb damage. So we ended up committing most of our immunities to that AoE, and we would just sit in the AoE and continue to kill the mobs.
Yeah, you can see me alter time. If the AoE goes out, you'll see my health go to 20, then back to 100.
Yeah, so you'll see right there, I stopped as many Bone Flays as I could. 3 of them still went off on Nerf, which is unfortunate, but I think that's actually the most we had.
So there were some different routes this weekend, and there were a decent amount of teams that ended up not pulling that Monstrosity, or at least doing a substantially smaller pull there. Like, what was the reason that you guys ended up skipping Narzuda and ended up doing like this pull? Was it just that much faster in terms of time? Because it seemed like it was like a really good pull, but at some point you kind of have to ask yourself, is this too big? Would we save more time pulling Narzuda with those anima orbs from the Goliath and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, like the pull was really consistent, which is a big thing. It was really easy to gather. It was easily, able to be repeated. And when you have a Shadow Priest Rogue, the Monstrosity is the one mob with like way more health than all the other mobs. But you have the Pulsing Orbs, which do your Goliath Orb, which does all the AoE, and then the Shadow Priest and Rogue, and Frost Mage too, even, can just pump their damage in the Monstrosity, so it basically dies at the same time as everything else anyways. And I don't know, it's just a really good, consistent, fast pull, and that's what we went with.
As long as you target the Monstrosity, it dies at the same time. Like I specifically made a /target macro for various mobs in the MDI, just so I could easily target it without having to like look for it, because the tank goes far and pulls a bunch of mobs back. The nameplates are not in range. So like when I grab the spear, like I press my target macro to target the Monstrosity, it just makes it so easy to burn it down.
The other thing that we liked about this was that we could use the end of our anima orbs, the Goliath orbs, to go kill the Executioner. So you'll see right here, I leave the pack when it's at like 10%, and then I go Door of Shadows up here to start the stun RP. So that
you could door past this without pulling that pack?
Yes, you can just door straight up to that little spot right there, and you will never pull. It's very, very useful for anyone who doesn't want to waste Invis, who is Vent there.
Well, you have to have that Marauder pack also killed off, so it's slightly less useful, but...
True, that's true, that's true.
Onesie had to Mind Soothe Fade, I think, or just Fade? I forgot one of the two.
Fade.
Yeah, it's just Fade, and you can get by with just by walking past those. Pretty nice.
We ended up deciding to do the Executioner separate on its own, which we decided to do because we wanted to get the most out of our Goliath Orb while the boss was still RPing, and also because we wanted to pick up our powers and then drag the boss over to this corner on pull. Reason we dragged the boss over to this corner on pull was because we were using the Shard of D's in order to pull the skeletons that are off screen right now. You'll see they're somewhere back there. So Onesie would use Shadow or Death to pull them, And if you were too far away from the corner here, like if you were over in this area, then the mobs would actually start evading and they would reset the boss. And so it was really bad. So we had to make sure that all of us were in this corner for the entire duration of this fight until all of the skeletons snapped up to the platform.
And the Shard of D's interaction, that's like when you do damage, it applies a stack of Shard of D's to whatever you're targeting, and that gets you in combat with them. But
yes,
if you're
but it's irrelevant now because they hotfixed it.
Yeah, okay, it used to. So before they hotfixed it, you could pull stuff with like could Light of the Martyr, Shadow or Death. It was anything that like damaged yourself, right?
Well, Light of the Martyr, you had to be wearing the Maraud's legendary because
okay.
It was like the style of damage that it dealt to you. I'm not 100% sure why, but yes, it had to be something that dealt damage to you as well.
I see.
Yeah, because what would happen is the way Shard of D's like the wording works is like you damage a target increases your damage done to that target. So if you're doing damage to yourself but you're targeting something that's in the other room, it's thinking like the Shard of D's just isn't thinking correctly, so it's just bouncing off the stack that would be applied to you to your target, which is in somewhere that isn't capable of being pulled.
And that's no longer they hotfixed that, so you can't use that.
Yeah, they hotfixed a couple of things, I think, right, Ellie? They hotfixed Shard of D's, the Tank Trinket, and you said the Holy Paladin Legendary?
They hotfixed everything. Anything. Okay. Well, the Holy Paladin Legendary was also Shard an interaction with D's. So they hotfixed the Shard of D's interactions, and they also hotfixed the Tazavesh Tank Trinket that could pull mobs from like 10 miles away.
There was actually a really, really, really funny interaction in Halls of Atonement that wasn't able to be shown, sadly, where you could pull the last boss into the third boss room and it would reset. And
you got told not to do that, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. We got told not to do that.
Do not do this.
Yeah, we asked him because we knew it was very ratty. Like we knew we had to ask.
We ended up not even playing Halls of Atonement.
Yeah, thank God, because those affixes were horrible.
Yeah, that was the live affixes from that week, right? The worst
Sanguine Necrotic.
Sanguine Necrotic. Yeah. All right, so what's going on with this boss fight? Is this boss fight ever lethal at all, or is this just on a 20 something that you're just kind of face rolling?
What I'll say is that every time the mages come up, it's always shackle into mage kick to get them in. So it's pretty much just like play it normal, then shackle one mage, kick the other mage. Once he tells me what he shackles, and I kick the other one.
Also, a main reason that we pulled these corpses in, actually, like the reason why you don't see them on the Monstrosities pull is because we actually used them to funnel boss damage on this fight. So our rogue is gaining damage from pulling these onto the boss fight, and our mage is also gaining damage from pulling these onto the boss.
All right,
so
who's top boss damage here? Very important.
It should be JPC.
Yeah, it's pretty much always James.
It should be JPC, Billy, and then myself.
Billy does really good boss damage though on this fight because of the ads.
Yeah. There's a lot of funnel for Billy, which is really good.
Is like the Shadow Priest probably could be doing way more if he was just like spamming AoE, but that would just be counterproductive, right? Because then he'd be killing off the ads too soon. And like we used to actually have Ellesmere Ashen Hall of this boss for speed, but then we realized that the Ashen Hall was just killing off the ads, and actually the boss fight was the exact same length whether he Ashen Hollowed or not. So then we were like, okay, we'll just move the Ashen Hollow upstairs to make the next pull safer and have the ads live longer.
Yeah, one thing to notice in our route is all the hard AoE pulls is usually done with Necrotic Wake weapons or like the Goliath Orbs or, whatever. So when it came to like building our like talents and our builds, like I think we all aimed to like a little bit more single target. And like especially like myself on the Shadow Priest, I basically aimed towards like a whole single target shadow build or a single target build, except for Seer and Nightmare. That was the only like AoE button I had, and basically just fully focusing on single target throughout the whole dungeon because AoE was pretty irrelevant thanks to the weapons. And I think we were able to save a lot of time because of that. Because a Marth would take a while, and then third boss you want to beat that check, and then the last boss you just want to make sure you have the least amount of Dark Exiles go out, which should only be one if you're playing good.
Makes sense. So what are we looking at here, Ellesmere?
So this pull, again, it's another massive pull. We're going to pull every mob in this zone. And the important thing here, besides Sagadon, yes, of course. The main thing, again, is just grouping. All of these big pulls are about grouping and then getting the stops on the dangerous mobs. So the only dangerous mobs here are the collectors. So you'll see there's one over here, one here. I think there's one down here and then one over to the right. So the goal was to get stops on the collectors or to get interrupts on them to get them into the pack as fast as possible. Because as soon as they were in, we were going to use Spear from James and the Orb from Nerf. Basically to interrupt everything and just kill it all instantly. And again, this is where we moved my Ashen Hollow to, because we found it was just safer, just in case anything went wrong. And my next Ashen Hollow wasn't going to be until last boss anyways.
How do you go about actually like collecting all these, gathering all these mobs up for this big pool?
The patrol was easy because it'll stop. So we want to gather everything towards the top left pack over there where the patrol is going. And so I tell James to distract that patrol there, to stop it there. And so the 2 collectors over there are easy to gather. So then the one in the top right, I just use a Sigil of Flame to tag that pack. And then I single tag the Monstrosity out to the bottom right that's out of camera right now. So there's a Monstrosity with a Flesh Crafter. Billy polymorphs that Flesh Crafter so we can mind control it later after the pack to skip the RP without killing it and save it for the last boss and the third boss. And then single target that, and then I'll leap over and throw glaive at the 3-pack. And then that one collector sometimes doesn't get in, so that collector gets mind control by onesie, and he runs it into the pack. And then you just run on top of the 2 packs up to the top left. And then the collector on the right gets kicked by Billy, and then it should walk in, and then everything gets gripped in.
We also make sure that we have Bop coming into this poll, because melee attacks stop mind control. So like it's just like a random spare part, like a soldier leaps on me, it'll stop the mind control and it'll make the pull a lot slower. So we make sure to fade Bop me so I can get the collector in without a problem.
All right, let's see it in action.
One thing we had a problem with kind of was the right collector getting in, but I noticed if I stood more to the left, it would come in. Like this blue, the guy marked blue, sometimes he would stop in the middle of the room.
Interesting. But like if you get farther away, then he'll just keep walking because nothing's in range.
Yeah. I just noticed the more to the left I stayed, the closer you came in. So I just always did that as a habit, and it worked good.
And then again, this is another spot where the spear is just hitting everything, and even though it's splitting its damage among more targets, it's applying that damage taken increase evenly to everything, and that is just a huge extra damage buff.
And then we have the orb, so the orb is finishing everything off and silencing it all.
So what is that bop on onesie for?
It was for the so his mind control doesn't get.
He mind controls one of the mobs.
Yeah, so yeah, you can see it right here. Actually, just back up a little bit. You can see that soldier leap to me. Just back up more, Ellie.
Yeah.
This is like so like he can see the soldier leaping onto me. So Nerf is going to pull. He jumps over here. I start casting mind control. I get Bop. And you're gonna see a soldier leap onto me. You can't see it slightly out of camera range, but he actually leaps to me, and it would have broke my mind control, and it would have made the pack a little bit slower.
Okay.
Because like grouping matters more than damage in this pool, where we have both weapons.
Grouping is always the most important thing by far. One thing that actually did happen here was Gore Splat went off, which is really, really dangerous. If it was a higher key level, we would have gotten one shot. Luckily, it wasn't. You can see it's casting right there, but I think it's supposed to be orb right now. I'm not sure why the orb. I'm not sure why the orb didn't interrupt that one, because you see it's active on Nerf right now.
I was waiting for the spear.
This is why we have Ashen.
Yeah, actually,
he's waiting for the spear.
Spear to hit.
Yeah, this is one of the funny things. So if you look, where I was positioned, if you rewind 10 seconds, you'll see me like go to charge up the spear, and then I like shuffle, like I move a bit, and then I throw the spear. And it's because like from failing this pull enough times, I knew that if I had thrown it from the spot where I was standing just then, like I go to throw it, and then I see that I need to realign myself, because it was like sometimes the pulls are just grouped ever so slightly differently, so you need to know how to react in that situation. And then because I had to move to realign myself for the spear, that cast went off because Nerf's orb was like 1 second later than it usually is. And in this situation, it was fine because we didn't wipe, but like that's the level of detail that causes a wipe. Like because I moved to the right, like for just 1 second that I don't normally do, a cast went off, and that could be the difference that like kills you or doesn't kill you. But it was fine.
Yeah, and the reason he does that is so he can get more priority target damage with the spear, because at the end of packs, like the longer priority target is living for, like the worse like your overall time is going to be. So James moving a little bit to get more priority target on the spear is overall just going to be better for the timer.
All right, then we see the mind control trick here. That's just, you need to kill all the enemies in this area to start the next RP section. But if you mind control this, it's no longer an enemy, right? So all the enemies have been killed. and so you get to go into the next little bit of the trash section, even though it's still alive.
So obviously you can play like something that we haven't talked about is the comp that you guys are running. Obviously that's why you're playing the Shadow Priest just as a whole. Was there ever thoughts of playing something like Disc Windwalker Monk, or was that kind of?
Oh yeah, for sure. We had to decide.
I think when we first entered a dungeon, like we had that discussion, but after looking at like the single target like increases we would get at a Holy Paladin and Priest, it just felt better to go in that direction, and I think overall it's still the right play.
It's also a comfort pick.
Yeah, for sure. Elliot has a lot of experience.
It's the right pick though, I think.
So one thing we did right here was the Fleshcrafter actually does like double damage. The Enrage does affect his cleaver damage. So something that we wanted to do that we adapted was we brought him into this chi pack and just kind of cleaved him down until he was sub 30. And then during this RP, we would make sure that we got all our dots off of him and just threw a fear sigil and then used sheep in order to keep him CC'd once he hit that 30%. So it doesn't matter, even if sheep heals him way past 30%, he can be at 100% health. Once he gets that enrage, it stays on him permanently until he gets soothed. So we just left that enrage on him so that later on when we did use that cleaver, it was empowered for all the bosses.
Wait,
we opted
did you say get all of your dots off of him? Onesies in shambles, dude.
No, yeah, so the whole entire time, so like if I have to spam poly that mob, I can actually get an Icy Veins on this and on the next pack, but if I have to spam poly, I actually cannot get an Icy Veins. So I'm missing a cooldown usage if I have to spam poly it. So I'd always remind them before it gets enraging to like don't redot it. I also had to enable this certain script to let me see all debuffs on the target so I could see dots myself, everyone's dots, just so I can know like when it's safe to poly or not.
Yeah,
because if I have to spam poly, it sucks.
One of the things too was Onesie's dots weren't even the worst dots. The worst dot was my file dot because that one lasted 30 seconds. And so I ended up actually opting for like a 1% less DPS trinket just for consistency. So we wouldn't have to worry about that. And that Billy we could easily keep track of the dots on there. Because like with file, like on the previous pack, if I was shuriken storming, it would just randomly go on the mob, and then it's like, oh, we're gonna have to poly up for 30 seconds now. So that's the reason why I ended up not using that trinket in the end.
Yeah,
so
one other thing that we opted to do was we just chose not to use the cleaver on these mobs simply because managing the CC would have taken away more than we would have gained since the packs die so fast at this key level on Tyrannical.
I actually thought about this, Ellie. I think it was the wrong play to not use the cleaver at all.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that too. We used to try to use it a couple times on the mobs before keeping it fully CC'd. I still don't know 100% whether or not it was the right move, since you would still have to do the AoE on the little mobs, and they pretty much all died at the same time due to all the funnel that we had. That being said, I'm really unsure as to whether or not it was a better play. I think we need to spend more time
the cleaver did hit really hard, so maybe more throughput.
I was thinking you could have throw cleaver Nova, throw cleaver Poly until the Nova recharges, throw cleaver Nova, throw cleaver Poly, but then Billy would have to stand a bit farther back, and it would take some more practice. But because like in the end, like because I'm funneling eviscerates and whatnot, and Onesie's funneling proud target damage, we do less AoE, so maybe you could kill the pack maybe 3 to 5 seconds faster if you got the cleavers in and you got the spam AoE. So yeah, I don't know, just a thought.
So this boss is basically just the same as always, but there is one thing that we adapted because it's kind of difficult to always guarantee the cleaver hits the boss based on the positioning of where the boss jumps and what the Stitch Flesh Creation's pathing is. So we needed to make sure that we guaranteed it every time. So what you're going to see me do here is right as we break this, you're going to see me bubble and I taunt the creation through the boss so that there's a clear path between the Fleshcrafter and Stitch Flesh. Now, normally I don't get the thing, but I actually did this time. So I taunted him out and I lined it up. And then you see the cleaver just has a clear path and instantly hits. And we have to do that twice because we want to beat his escape, which happens in 15 seconds. So the whole goal is just to beat that timer. So right here, the Flesh Crafter is going to do it again. I taunt him out, but I actually got really unlucky because I got targeted again. And if that one targets me, there's not always something I can do about it. Fortunately, I kind of leaned him to the left there, and he started casting Mutilate and stopped running. And so I was able, I think, no, actually, nope, that one's definitely, did it hit the creation?
No, this one, the boss jumps up, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so if that had gone in, we would have been fine, but I got really unlucky that it targeted me while I was taunting the creation out. On our other run against Obey Alliance, it actually happened again, but I was able to get the cleaver in. This time, not so lucky.
Does it ever, do you ever like audible a hammer here? Or no?
No.
No.
I mean, we never did in practice.
Yeah, we wouldn't either.
The thing is, like, last boss, the hammers are just so valuable because it's all about beating as many of the send downs as possible. The Dark Exiles just lose so much time on the key. And the reality is that worst comes to worst on this boss, if you don't hammer, all you have to do is just get one more hook in right before he's transitioning. And you don't really lose that much time. You saw it happen here, right? So, yeah, there's no reason we would ever really...
I think the threshold for the boss to not jump up is like 5% or something. So as long as the team is realizing that that threshold is not going to be met and they can hit the next cleaver in, it's not really that much of a time loss compared to not throwing your hammer on the last boss, which can be really detrimental if you get a Dark Exile.
We do sometimes audible hammer on high keys, but that's an entirely different thing. The reason we would do it on high keys is because this boss on high keys is actually super, super dangerous. And it can get out of control really fast if you don't meet some of the damage checks. So depending on the key level and the affixes, sometimes we will audible a hammer on this if we feel like we're getting too far behind, and or if we happen to like kill a creation on accident by spearing, which is something we definitely avoided here. We always tried to spear only the boss and not the creation, because if you spear the creation as well, then you're not going to get that safety net of being able to line up that second hook right before he escapes. You have to wait for the new one to spawn, and then it's a very, very big time loss.
Okay, so nuanced point. How do you guys get the Fleshcrafter to teleport up top? Because I've heard that other teams have been having, like, they were having some issues with getting the guy to snap up. Obviously, you guys have done it for a while with, like, the Great Push and whatnot, but, like, what exactly do you have to do to get it to teleport?
Well, we throw one Hodge, 360s, and you have to jump once right when you land on top of the platform.
I think the Hodge and the grip are good because generally, like, if you're positioned directly above it, this is just our running theory, but if you're positioned directly above it, there's like a higher chance it'll snap. But I always put just a 2 combo point rupture or a 1 combo point rupture, so it's like 10 or 8 second dot, and then it seems that right as the dot expires, it snaps up. So I just do.
I still kind of think this is all tinfoil hat.
Yeah, it is. But that's what we started doing, and ever since we started doing that, it always snaps up instantly for us. So
Yeah.
So
it's all about consistency.
The ground here, like if you look at the pattern on the ground here, it mirrors the one above, right? So you can tell when you're standing above it.
Yeah, you can tell we have spent a lot of time theorizing about conspiracies regarding the snapping of this crafter. We all have our different theories.
Yeah, okay.
We also poly him down here too, so that way when he snaps up at full health, so we don't accidentally cleave him and then have to have Billy poly him while we're fighting last boss. This way it's fine if we cleave him down because he has so much health when we...
By the way, the point of that grip sigil is to grip him off of the center thing, because if the crafter is directly on that portal, you can't click the portal. It's really annoying. So we grip him off, and then we hodge him off, and then we take the portal, and then we come up here and we do boss. And boss is pretty straightforward. There's nothing really... Yeah, there's nothing really unique about it. We just pop every single cooldown directly on pull. And the whole goal here is once he snaps up, which you'll see, he still hasn't snapped up. There we go. Now he's up. Once he snaps up, the goal here is just to get every single cleaver into the boss. So you'll see that one went on onesie, who is positioned over here. And that's actually something we addressed after the MDI, was we talked about having better positioning, because
Shadow Priest doesn't have any movement, man.
Yeah,
like,
Shadow
Priest.
My
boom, I can just disengage and I'm there, man. But
yeah,
Yeah.
When we
need to move there before you pull the boss.
When we played Obey Alliance, we missed 2 cleavers and we lusted while it was on cooldown. So we
had a lot of major mistakes on the last boss, which, I'm not sure what would have happened if we hadn't made those mistakes, but definitely didn't help us.
Yeah, well, actually, we got here like versus Obey Alliance 20 seconds before we got here in this clip just now.
Yeah,
so we were cruising.
So this cleaver is going on Billy. One thing that we definitely try to do, so we all went Night Elf, or the 3 DPS went Night Elf, so that they could use Shadow Meld in order to cheese the Dark Exile. So if Dark Exile picks you and then you Shadow Meld it, the Dark Exile won't go off. It actually will just cancel and he'll start another spell queue. He will recast Dark Exile again soon, sometimes directly after, sometimes after a couple other abilities. It's not super consistent in terms of that because you are kind of cheesing his spell queuing. But you'll see, I think we already missed it. I think there was already a Dark Exile, or maybe there wasn't.
Onesie, how young are your grips? We gotta know.
I am a boomer with the grips.
Yeah, the grip tech, we definitely spent some time on that, and
if the person is in melee, I'm very boomer with it. But if the person's in range, I'm like semi-zoomer. I'm like almost there.
Yeah, so if you grip them as they're getting exiled, you could grip them out of it, right? And they don't get
if they're in melee, it's a lot more difficult though, because what you're basically gripping is a projectile, and the projectile leaves the boss's body. So if the person's in melee, like your window of timing has to be really, really precise. But if the person's in range, like you have a little bit of leeway because you're like basically watching the projectile fly at them.
The one thing that I think in retrospect we should have done is like we were just sending our Shadow Melds on cooldown to try and like push the boss low enough so that he stops casting Dark Exile before he actually sends someone down. But what we should have done is just let any non-onesie Dark Exiles go off and practice the grips more probably. And that's probably a safer way to always get the grip. But
we did that, but then we didn't hit the grips. And then we also lost.
Well, it's because when I was trying to hit the ones on JPC and he's in melee, like those were a lot harder to hit than the ones on Billy in range. So
it's one of those things probably where it's like if we would have spent maybe 3 or 4 hours just practicing grips on the last boss, it would have got to the point where onesie can hit it every time. But it's just always that debate, okay,
is that a good use of 4 hours?
Exactly.
4 hours, so.
Because it was basically just a thing of I didn't have enough practice on it, so we just committed to full Night Elf in the first one, and then hopefully just beat the second one, or grip it if I have to.
Wow, thanks so much for showing us what was going on in this dungeon. This is very, very cool to watch. Much appreciated.
Of course.
Thanks for having us.
You guys have anything to say to the fans?
Sorry, we suck at myths.
They hate the fans.